Welcome back to another explainer. Okay, today we're exploring a profoundly powerful idea. It's this concept that our thoughts, and not external events, are what actually dictate our reality. Have you ever wondered why two people can experience the exact same setback, but one completely falls apart, while the other just uses it as a launchpad for success? Well, we're going to trace how our minds construct our emotional worlds, and discover exactly how shifting your mental lens can literally change the world around you. Let's get right into it.
Think about this for a second. When Steve Jobs decided to build a closed phone ecosystem, the entire market, which was dominated by open systems like Nokia at the time, told him it made zero sense. I mean, even his own board pushed back. Or take Elon Musk, right? When he said he was going to build rockets that fly into space and then land backwards on a platform, aeronautics experts and seasoned astronauts literally laughed at him. They said the physics, the reality of the situation just made it impossible. Yet they did it. How? Well, it wasn't just a difference in business strategy. It was a fundamental difference in how they perceived and interacted with reality itself. Their mental frameworks literally allowed them to reshape the external world.
Okay, so here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, the birth of psychology from philosophy. 2, changing reality with mind power. 3, how do thoughts make feelings? 4, separating thoughts from reality. And finally, number 5, getting familiar with cognitive distortions.
All right, kicking things off with Section 1, the birth of psychology from philosophy.
It's kind of fascinating to realize that for most of human history, psychology wasn't a standalone science. Prior to the late 19th century, specifically before 1874, figures like Lotze and Stump, they were basically philosophers studying the mind in the abstract. It wasn't really until 1874, when Wilhelm Wundt and Franz Brentano published their groundbreaking works, that psychology formally separated from philosophy. They brought in empirical, descriptive, and experimental methods. And this shift, this is what absolutely laid the groundwork for us to study human cognition, not just as some abstract theory, but as a measurable, changeable process.
Moving right along to Section 2, changing reality with mind power.
So there's this fascinating concept in phenomenology called intentionality. And basically, this is the idea that our consciousness is always directed at something. Think of your mind kind of like a pair of glasses. The objective reality, say a book on a table or a fluctuating stock market, doesn't change. But if you put on a pair of blurry glasses, your interpretation of that reality completely shifts. The object is exactly the same, but your subjective experience of it is totally different. And this is exactly what allowed visionaries like Elon Musk or Steve Jobs to look at a supposedly impossible problem and see an opportunity. They were simply wearing a different pair of cognitive glasses. They absolutely refused to accept the blurry reality presented by the status quo.
Now for Section 3, how do thoughts make feelings? Let's actually see how this plays out on a day-to-day level.
Okay, so the absolute crucial point to understand here is this. Thoughts are not feelings. We mix the two up all the time, but they are entirely different things. More importantly, feelings like anxiety, anger, despair, or even joy, they don't just spontaneously happen to you. They are the direct result of a preceding thought or interpretation. Literally, you cannot feel an emotion without your brain first having a thought to generate it.
To really wrap our heads around this, we use something called the ABC model. A stands for activating event. Basically, something happens in the world. B stands for belief or interpretation. This is what you think about that event. And C is the consequence, the emotion or behavior that follows right after. I actually want you to actively engage with this right now. Think of your own personal activating event from today. Maybe it's a career change, a relationship issue, or a financial stressor. Note that the event itself is just A. Your anxiety or frustration, that's C. The bridge between them is B, your own unique, individual belief about the event.
Let's look at this ABC model in action, because it's a real game changer. Notice how the exact same activating event results in wildly different consequences, entirely based on the chosen belief. Look at row 1, a window slams. If your belief is, oh my gosh, it's a burglar, the consequence is severe anxiety and you're calling the police. But if your belief is, it's just the wind, you feel mild irritation and just get up to close it. Same with the example down below. Your spouse is reading on the couch. If you think, they don't care about me, you feel angry, right? You give them the silent treatment. But if you think, they just love reading, you feel happy, and maybe bring them a cup of tea. The external reality hasn't changed a single inch, but the emotional reality is worlds apart.
That brings us to Section 4, separating thoughts from reality.
When we're depressed or anxious, we falsely treat our subjective hypotheses as if they are undeniable, unchangeable facts. Psychologist Robert Leahy uses a fantastic analogy for this. On the left side here, we have a thought, I will definitely fail my presentation tomorrow. On the right, a statement, I am a giraffe. Leahy argues that, functionally, we should treat these two thoughts the exact same way. Think about it. You don't instantly believe you're a giraffe just because the thought pops into your head, right? Yet when the thought, I will fail, pops up, you immediately treat it as a stone-cold fact. We really have to realize that our negative thoughts are just guesses. They are hypotheses waiting to be tested, not absolute truths.
So how do we actually test them? Well, you use the 0 to 100 rating technique. When a negative event happens, just pause and ask yourself, from 0 to 100, how intense is my negative emotion right now? Let's say it's a 100 because, I don't know, a colleague didn't say hello to you, and your immediate belief is they hate you. Then you actively generate alternative realities. What if they just didn't see you? What if they were totally lost in thought? As you test out these alternative explanations, you'll find your belief in the original negative thought dropping, and consequently, your emotional intensity drops from 100 down to a 40, or maybe even 0. You literally break the cycle by testing reality.
All right, on to our final segment, Section 5, Familiarity with Cognitive Distortions.
So these are cognitive distortions. They're essentially those blurry spots on the mental glasses we talked about earlier. Take mind reading. That's assuming you know exactly what someone else is thinking without any actual evidence. Like assuming someone is furious with you just because they're being a little quiet. Or fortune telling, predicting a terrible future, like deciding you won't get a job before you even apply for it. Then there's catastrophizing, which is blowing things entirely out of proportion. Like if you get one bad grade, suddenly your entire life is ruined. We also use labeling, calling ourselves worthless instead of just acknowledging a simple mistake. And we constantly discount the positives, dismissing our own successes as just mere luck.
And the list goes on, right? A negative filter makes you see only the bad in a situation, while completely ignoring the good. Overgeneralization happens when just one bad event becomes a never-ending pattern of defeat. What's really crucial to understand here is that when you compound these distortions, especially things like overgeneralization and blaming others for your emotional state, you can so easily trap yourself in a long-term victim schema. You actually start to believe that you have absolutely no agency, that the world is just happening to you. When in reality, your cognitive distortions are just coloring your perception.
Which brings us to a beautiful 2,500-year-old story that just perfectly encapsulates everything we've talked about today. So, the Buddha was once sitting with his students when a man approached and just began viciously insulting him. The man yelled, insulted him repeatedly, but the Buddha remained completely calm, just simply smiling back. Confused and pretty frustrated, the man finally left. One of the Buddha's students, who was really upset by the disrespect, asked why he didn't react. The Buddha replied, "He offered me a gift, and I simply chose not to accept it." By consciously controlling his beliefs, by choosing not to let that activating event become a negative consequence, he completely mastered his own emotional reality. Your thoughts are the architects of your world. So the question I'll leave you with today is, what kind of world are your thoughts building for you right now? Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and keep questioning your reality.